The story begins with the image of two soldiers struggling to push a heavy cart. On it lies a bundled piece of cloth, rumored to contain the body of a person who has undergone reincarnation. The wounds on the body suggest an attack by goblins, with ghastly injuries that serve as the price for being weak and careless. Toru Mizunori is an office worker enduring a cruel boss, like many others, forced to work overtime. Unsure if he'll catch the last train home yet unable to complain. Toru's submissive nature always makes him a target for superiors. Unsure of his future, he resigns to his fate. His only joy and skill is in playing online games. Lost in thought and crossing the street, Mizunori fails to notice an oncoming vehicle, and is suddenly reincarnated into an unfamiliar world. He is awakened by a girl who claims to be a goddess in this land. Seeing her eat with her hands, Mizunori offers her a pair of chopsticks, which she joyfully uses. He is the first person to dare tell her what to do, making him quite special in her eyes. Curious about this new world, the girl realizes Mizunori can't remember his past. He has fallen through a temporal rift and been reborn. Though he has tasks to accomplish, there's no way back. The land he finds himself in is called Urgard, resembling Earth, but fraught with greater dangers. As a mere office worker, Mizunori wonders how he'll survive. But the goddess equips him with a skill board to develop himself. If used correctly, it will grant him a fulfilling life with extraordinary power. Given a new body, as his old one was beyond repair, the goddess advises him not to waste her gifts and to do what he believes is right. Before he can comprehend his situation, she vanishes into the night, leaving him unconscious. When he awakes, he finds himself in a dark cave next to a pool of blood, presumably from his former body. Pleased with his new, sturdy and handsome body, Mizunori decides to make the best of it. He examines the skill board, noting its similarity to the games he played. The original owner of the body appears to have been a hunter, given the high hunting skills. The goddess, confident in his cautious nature, believes everything will be fine. Mizunori needs only courage and careful planning to make his second life better than his first. The goddess, returning to her bed, finds the young man quite intriguing. Although the goddess had sent hundreds to Urgard, none had strived to survive. She hoped Mizunori would be the special one to properly utilize the control board. This is the story of an ordinary man named Mizunori, who reincarnates and achieves the pinnacle of power. Gifted a new life by the goddess, Mizunori understood he had to learn new knowledge. Starting at level 1, he diligently trained his skills to survive. After a few upgrades, his SP, skill points, reached a high of 1,000. But what caught his attention was a feature to break limits, possibly an extraordinary level. Suddenly, a loud noise from within the cave, like a monster, disturbed Mizunori. A giant scorpion emerged, and he had only a small stick. Fortunately, his heightened senses allowed him to escape before it attacked with bloodthirsty intent. But such creatures rarely give up easily. Deciding to fight, Mizunori drew his demonic sword, slicing the giant scorpion in half, a sight so grotesquely fascinating. Before he could relax, more insects emerged from the cave. This explained the goddess's inscrutable expression when she chose to send him to this place. Mizunori wondered how long he would have to survive in this world. Memories of his past life flashed before him. Waking up tired in his small room, being oppressed by his boss, walking home exhausted after overtime, and never daring to think of love or savings due to his financial struggles. Life had been a monotonous cycle of tedium. But now, this life was the best. He could unleash the strength he had long suppressed, transforming into someone else entirely. Despite the monsters charging at him, he was not afraid. In fact, he might even be thankful to the goddess. His bravery in direct combat helped him overcome this ordeal. As he looked at the fallen creatures, Mizunori felt a surge of power within. His level had astonishingly jumped from 1 to 8, a remarkable leap. Although Mizunori defeated the monsters, the battle exhausted him. It seemed his soul and body were still not fully synchronized, making the fight overly strenuous. Each level up granted him 10 SP, and acquiring the demonic sword cost only 1 SP. But upgrading it was another challenge. His first task was to find a way out of the insect-infested cave. Despite wanting to explore deeper, his sensory skills warned him against it, as something beyond his current abilities lurked inside. Escape seemed possible only by climbing the cave walls. As he climbed, stalactites broke off and fell. Noticing their shimmer, Mizunori decided to take some with him, possibly to sell. Finally reaching the cave entrance, he headed towards a village. However, the villagers were hostile, threatening and driving him away. Mizunori learned that his new body previously belonged to someone named Lid, a man shunned and hated by the villagers. He found Lid's old, dilapidated house, the only shelter available. Inside, Mizunori discovered Lid's hunting equipment in a spatial storage. Exiled from village farming activities, Lid had survived by hunting. After consuming Lid's dried meat and changing into his clothes, Mizunori felt he had made a start. Unexpectedly, a group approached and struck him on the head with a rock, knocking him down. Pretending to be unconscious from the blow, which wasn't really painful, Mizunori wondered why they hated Lid so much. Not just them, but the entire village bore a grudge against Lid, some even calling him a demon. But this was a good opportunity for Mizunori to leave that damned village. The three men wrapped him in a large cloth and carried him up the mountain, unaware that he was only feigning death to observe their next move. He was curious about what the villagers and these three, named Voror, Robert, and their leader Clement, were planning. They appeared unfriendly and aggressive, much like the villagers who had mistreated Lid. They seemed determined to kill Lid at all costs, and Mizunori decided to confront them directly about it. He disliked such physical confrontations. They took him back to the same cave and threw him down the cliff. But astonishingly, he was unscathed. It seemed this was where they resolved their disputes. The blood pool he had awakened next to must have been their doing too. They couldn't believe he was unharmed after the fall, and even more so when he approached to speak with them. Though they were fearful, they still tried to attack Mizunori with an axe and a trident. His upgraded body was now as tough as iron. The trident bent upon impact, and the axe couldn't touch him despite Robert's attempts. Mizunori, using his enhanced skills, easily dodged Robert's blows. Voror sensed something unusual. Could this really be the same Lid he had tormented? Mizunori only wanted to talk, but it seemed no one wanted to converse, only to resort to violence. The two men tried to hold Mizunori down for their leader, Clement. Clement, boasting of being the strongest in the village, lifted a large tree trunk and threatened to crush Mizunori. But Mizunori wasn't going to let him have the chance. He loudly insisted he just wanted to talk and asked them to stop. If they didn't, he warned, he would not hold back anymore. Mizunori, seizing the moment, struck Clement, sending him flying several meters away. It was clear to them that this was not the Lid they knew. Now, they faced a demon. Once the fight ceased, Mizunori finally had the chance to ask why Lid was so ostracized. Was he a criminal? The trio, thinking Mizunori had lost his memory due to a head injury, recounted the story. It turned out it was all because of his black hair and eyes, which were seen as symbols of evil and a curse. Lid's birth had supposedly brought misfortune to the village, like failed crops and monster attacks. Mizunori realized he was in a superstitious village, something he had only read about in books. Although he sympathized with their ignorance, learning that they had even turned on Lid's parents for their beliefs was too much for him to bear. Their baseless, rotten convictions had led to innocent people getting hurt. The villagers' outrage at having their beliefs challenged sent them into a frenzy, but seeing Mizunori draw his demonic sword and the change in his eye color made them hesitate. The village chief declared that Lid was the root of all disasters and must be eliminated. However, despite their fear, they decided to confront Mizunori for the village's supposed peace. The ensuing battle was not as straightforward as Mizunori had anticipated. Although they were struck by his blade, they were surprisingly unharmed and fled into the cave. Mizunori couldn't warn them in time about the monster inside, and they were swallowed by the darkness. Facing their cries for help, Mizunori knew there was little he could do. Who would sympathize and understand Lid's family's plight? The tragic end seemed fitting for their actions, but their remarks about the change in his eye color made him wonder if it was due to his newfound powers. At that moment, Mizunori's intuition picked up a distress call. A beautiful girl was battling the cave's monsters. Who was she? Encircled by goblins. And did she have any connection to Mizunori and his mission? Just hours earlier, in the city of Felis, this girl named Esther was celebrated for defeating a giant slime, her courage and duty making her actions unsurprising. But it turned out to be nothing noteworthy. Esther was on a mission to level up from E to D, tasked with eliminating a group of goblins spotted roaming the forest. The assignment was based on unverified sightings, which seemed rather ambiguous. Dealing with a large number of goblins could be unpredictable, but the benefits for both her and her guild were too significant to refuse. Bravely, Esther ventured into the forest alone, searching for the small creatures without fear. To her surprise, she encountered not just a few but a swarm of over 50 goblins. Assembling such a large group unnoticed indicated a significant force at play. The Adventurers Guild would have eliminated these goblins long ago if they had known. Goblins, limited in cognition and easily defeated in small numbers, posed a real threat as an army, even to C-ranked adventurers. Realizing the danger, Esther decided to return to the city to seek help from her guild. Just as she was about to leave to report the situation, she accidentally stepped on a branch, alerting the goblins and triggering a chase. Outnumbered, she was quickly surrounded, with no chance of calling for reinforcements. Each goblin had a ferocious look, ready to pounce and fight. Esther, with a resigned smirk, knew this might be the end of her journey. Just as she resolved to take down as many as possible, Mizunori appeared. Witnessing Esther battling alone, he couldn't stand idly by. He valiantly fought off the goblins, impressing Esther. Saved from a dire situation, she was grateful to her rescuer. Mizunori, puzzled by why a girl like her was in such a dangerous place, wondered if she too was a warrior like him or just a victim of circumstance. He asked if she could handle her side while he took care of the rest. But this was no time for questions. They each took a direction and fought off the goblins, not allowing them any chance to counterattack. Esther shouted a warning to Mizunori about a goblin attacking from behind, but he calmly bisected the assailant, displaying remarkable composure. Esther wondered if Mizunori could sense the goblins, but if he was this skilled, he would already be famous in the city. So, who was he? His strength might not come from himself, but the sword he wielded. Lost in thought, Esther didn't notice the goblins shifting their focus to her. Seeing the change, Mizunori activated a threatening skill to draw their attention, single-handedly defeating them without hesitation. The goblins, unaware they were walking into a trap, rushed at Mizunori and were swiftly dealt with. After the goblins lay motionless at his feet, Mizunori finally allowed himself a satisfied smile. Fortunately, the sword in Mizunori's hand had proved effective, eventually reverting back to its original form as an axe. Turning to Esther, he inquired if she was injured, but she was too awestruck to care about such trivialities. With an admiring look, Esther approached Mizunori and suggested they team up, but he was unfamiliar with the concept of teams and appeared somewhat dismissive. His unkempt appearance and confusion about the situation reflected his concern for leaving Esther alone in such a place. Noticing his reluctance, Esther realized she might have been too forward and apologized. She was surprised to learn that Mizunori had only just learned about goblins. He was aware of his disheveled state, with his only shirt stained with blood. However, Mizunori didn't realize that Esther wasn't concerned about his appearance. She admired him regardless. She introduced herself as an adventurer from the city of Phyllis, and he introduced himself as Minasuki. He had found her beautiful even amidst their fight, the first person he had conversed with since arriving in this world. Mizunori was unaware of adventurers in this world, and Esther's beauty seemed like something out of a dream. Suddenly, Esther jumped towards him, eager to know where he came from. She couldn't recall ever seeing him in the city before. After she listed several possible titles, he replied that he was just an ordinary person. Mizunori tried to reassure her that goblins were easy to defeat, but her attitude changed upon hearing him claim to be just an ordinary person, making him realize his mistake. He thought that killing goblins required a license, and without one, he might end up in jail. He pleaded with Esther to take credit for the goblin killings, hoping to avoid prison. Esther then patiently explained their current situation. With his skills, Mizunori could easily become an adventurer. As an adventurer, he could earn enough in a day to last a month, and as a hero, he could acquire great wealth. But Mizunori was still weighing the pros and cons, seeing it as a part-time job. While it was a common and potentially dangerous occupation, he wondered if it was suitable for someone like him. Since arriving, he had survived by hunting and farming, whereas an adventurer's job involved exploring new lands and creatures, expanding the world map. Mizunori felt that his arrival in this new world was a chance given by fate to enjoy a life unburdened by his past. His excitement was further fueled by the possession of a skill board. Following Esther's suggestion, he decided to go to Phyllis with her to join an adventurer's guild and become an adventurer himself. Esther was puzzled to see him meticulously disposing of the goblin corpses in the forest. She advised him that he could lead the bodies and take only their ears as proof of their defeat to report to the guild. She also cautioned him to be wary of goblin hunters, especially around the forest's edge. Esther was delighted when Mizunori asked her to guide him to Phyllis. She told him he could drop the formalities with her as she was not a noble, and after all, he had saved her life. They hurried back to the city before the gates closed, with Esther worried Mizunori might not keep up. However, to her surprise, Mizunori was still cheerful and energetic. He pretended to be tired, not revealing his basic recovery ability, which allowed his body to regenerate energy without fatigue. But upon reaching the city gates, they were spotted by the guards. Esther, seemingly a local celebrity, was quickly surrounded by people inquiring about her battle with the goblins. While she modestly claimed it was just to better protect the city, her demeanor suggested otherwise. Entering the city required a guild member card, which Mizunori lacked. Unable to enter with a card, he needed to pay a large deposit, which Esther covered for him. Stepping into the bustling Phyllis, Mizunori was amazed and excited. The city was full of novelties for him, especially the weapon shops, a dragon head hanging in front of a building, a witch-like girl, and skewered meat sold for 1 guard each. Esther realized Mizunori was unfamiliar with the currency and patiently explained it to him, without judging his ignorance. Suddenly, they noticed a crowd cheering in the distance. Approaching, they saw it was a competition, where capturing the creatures involved could yield significant rewards. It turns out they were at a stall hosting an eel-catching contest. Catching an eel meant it would be cooked and served on the spot. The task appeared easy, but the eel's unpredictable movements made it challenging. As evident from the disappointed faces of the participants, successful players would win prizes attached to the eels. Even for experienced adventurers, this game was a tough challenge. Before Esther could finish explaining, Mizunori was already holding a bunch of eels, having caught them effortlessly. To him, catching the eels was simple using his tracking skills and physical abilities. He didn't care for the taste, so he gave them away to nearby children. Despite the late hour, the city still sparkled beautifully to Mizunori. He noticed the Forces building, one of the 6 temples, symbolizing spiritual power in the city. He wondered if the goddess he met upon reincarnation was there. But then he remembered her lazy demeanor and felt sorry for her followers. They quickly reached the Adventurers Guild, a bustling and noisy place, befitting the largest city in the region. Esther spotted Marie from afar and went to greet her, surprising everyone with her quick and safe return from the mission. However, everyone looked at Mizunori with suspicion, wondering where this unknown young man had come from. Marie felt uneasy around Mizunori. Despite having met many adventurers, she couldn't quite gauge his strength. But she composed herself, being the guild's receptionist. Marie's demeanor worsened upon learning Mizunori was not an adventurer but an ordinary person. It was unfathomable to her that a regular individual could easily defeat a horde of goblins. That's when Philip, the guild leader, approached to greet Esther after her mission. But Esther was not going to let this go. She slammed the table, demanding an explanation for the unexpectedly high number of goblins, which was not part of the original assignment. She suspected Philip was hiding something about the mission. Philip awkwardly attempted to leave after a cursory apology, promising a more suitable mission next time. When Philip suggested marking the mission as a failure, Esther became furious. She pushed Mizunori forward, declaring that the mission was a success because of him. Philip sneered at Mizunori's appearance, doubting he could defeat goblins, but his disbelief turned to shock when Esther presented the collected goblin ears. Before Philip could leave, Esther pulled him back, demanding he apologize to Mizunori for his derogatory comments. Reluctantly, Philip apologized, fearing the consequences if the mishandling of the mission came to light. After the guild leader left, Marie expressed concern to Esther, wondering if her confrontation with Philip would cause future difficulties. But for Esther, no one was allowed to disrespect or harm her savior. Mizunori felt grateful towards Esther for her support. To Marie, all adventurers were talented and deserved fair treatment. After a brief wait, the reward for their mission was finally presented. They received a sum for the 43 goblin ears, plus a compensation for Philip's insult towards Mizunori. Esther generously divided the money, giving the larger share to Mizunori and keeping only a small amount for herself. Surprised, Mizunori accepted it and reimbursed Esther for the city gate fee, settling their accounts. Esther then proposed that Mizunori register as a guild member right away. Marie eagerly agreed and provided the paperwork for him to sign. Mizunori, focusing, realized he could understand the language. Next was a test for new adventurers. Marie's cryptic smile as she mentioned the test gave Mizunori a chill. The test involved sitting opposite a crystal ball, which evaluated one's soul for past crimes, marking the souls of those who had committed offenses. Mizunori recalled his fight with Clement's group, but reassured himself it was self-defense. Swallowing nervously, he approached the crystal ball to begin the test. The ball glowed faintly, surprising both girls. They questioned how long Mizunori had been in this world, as the light emitted was weaker than expected, akin to that of a newborn. The surrounding crowd laughed, mocking Mizunori as a lost soul who should disappear quickly. This enraged Esther, who defended him fiercely. Apparently, lost souls appeared occasionally but never survived long and were often destitute, leading to their disdain. Nonetheless, this didn't affect Mizunori's application as an adventurer. Determined to persevere, he decided to continue with the registration. Intent on working hard to rise up, two adventurers approached Mizunori, mocking him and questioning why Esther and Marie were wasting time with him, calling him a lowlife. Enraged, Esther was about to draw her sword for a confrontation, but Mizunori knew it was unnecessary. He activated his intimidating aura, making the bullies wet their pants in fear. Even Marie was affected by this show of power, and everyone realized that Mizunori was not someone to be trifled with. With no further objections, Mizunori's registration as a guild member was nearly complete. The final step was a combat ability test, where he would have to demonstrate his skills to a trainer. Performing well could elevate him directly to rank E. Bypassing F ready to take the final test, he learned he would be meeting with Mr. Graf. Both girls' horrified reactions to the name puzzled Mizunori. Graf was a legendary adventurer in the city, a rank C hero that many aspired to emulate, known as a strict and demanding trainer. Despite his retirement, his reputation still invoked fear. Arriving at the training arena, Mizunori met the imposing, one-eyed Graf. Its mere presence exerted an indescribable pressure, even affecting Marie, who struggled to speak. Graf initially seemed impressed with Mizunori, acknowledging his young age and potential. However, his demeanor abruptly changed upon reviewing Mizunori's test paper and learning he was a lost soul. He bluntly suggested Mizunori abandon the idea of becoming an adventurer, shocking everyone with his sudden turnaround and leaving Mizunori confused and unsettled. Graf's behavior left Mizunori unsure of how to react. For Graf, the idea of someone like Mizunori becoming an adventurer seemed pointless and impractical, and he reminded Mizunori to value his own life. Esther, unable to tolerate such criticism, attempted to intervene but was stopped by Graf. However, Graf conceded that he had no right to prevent Mizunori from pursuing this path if he chose to continue. Mizunori, undeterred by the comments, confidently insisted on taking the test. Graf was surprised but proceeded with the test, pointing Mizunori to a rack of combat tools and asking him to choose one. The test required Mizunori to attack Graf, who would evaluate his strength. Graf stated he would not be responsible for any self-inflicted harm to Mizunori, who was taken aback by Graf's willingness to face the attack unarmed. Before the test commenced, Graf expressed regret for what he was about to do, stating it was Mizunori's choice. He explained that the limit for a lost soul like Mizunori was always level 1, with no skill progression, and he didn't want to see Mizunori sacrifice himself needlessly. Despite his stern appearance, Graf didn't wish harm on any young person. He blamed Mizunori's predicament on his reincarnation. The test began, and Mizunori attacked Graf, with full force using a staff, unexpectedly knocking the trainer to the ground. Although Mizunori hesitated, unsure of what to do next, Esther excitedly cheered for him. She had hoped Mizunori would defeat Graf himself, but Mizunori couldn't bring himself to do that. Graf, struggling to understand how he had been bested by a level 1, considered whether his age had weakened him. The test concluded, and Graf inquired whether Mizunori had been a swordsman or something similar in his past life. Mizunori's defeat of a rank C veteran like Graf was inconceivable for a level 1 individual, leading Graf to wonder about Mizunori's mysterious past and exceptional strength. Graf was incredulous when Mizunori said his techniques were learned in school, thinking that if Mizunori had been trained in a royal academy, he must be a lost soul of extraordinary origin. Graf advised Mizunori to cherish and be thankful for his abilities. Mizunori, knowing he was bluffing, hoped his secret would remain undiscovered. He had passed the test and was free to go, much to Esther's delight. However, the space to record his strength level was left blank by Graf, who believed Mizunori had no formal combat technique, but possessed raw power that could be honed over time. Esther enthusiastically mentioned that this meant Mizunori could be ranked highest, but Mizunori humbly disagreed. Graf, feeling unwell, quickly left to rest. Marie, holding Mizunori's test result, was visibly shocked, unable to believe someone like him could defeat the top-ranked Graf. Her initial instincts about Mizunori's extraordinary capabilities were correct. His potential to reach rank B, which required exceptional strength and the ability to handle national crises, was evident. Marie's odd behavior was disconcerting to Esther. It was the first time Marie had encountered such a powerful young man, making her think she had found her future husband. Marie, an ideal model for the girls in the region, as the receptionist at the Adventurers Guild, had a demanding job interacting with various adventurers daily. Despite the challenges and the risk of being reprimanded, the role was sought after as it offered the chance to meet many high-ranking adventurers. Being associated with a rank C adventurer meant a life of luxury, akin to nobility. Now, with Mizunori, who had defeated Graf with a single punch, Marie saw a promising future. She was unconcerned about his current state, focusing instead on his potential growth. Mizunori felt awkward under Marie's gaze. When he asked if she was all right, she assured him she was fine, just stunned by his victory over Graf. She then explained the rules and regulations for becoming an adventurer, emphasizing the prohibition of harming civilians and other ranked individuals, unless in self-defense. Marie, showing a clear preference for Mizunori, offered to assist him with any difficulties he might face, and even promised to assign him promising clients. Esther noticed Marie's unusual behavior and apparent favoritism towards Mizunori, which was evident in her willingness to support and guide him. When Mizunori received his membership card, Marie seized the opportunity to fall into his arms in a seemingly accidental but suggestive manner. Surprisingly, her home address appeared on the back of his card, a coincidence that did not escape Esther's notice. She could no longer tolerate Marie's behavior and sent her away, insisting she go home to rest and bathe. Mizunori, though considering changing the information on the card, decided to let it be to avoid further awkward encounters with Marie. Esther once again asserted her role in taking care of Mizunori from the beginning, clearly showing her jealousy towards Marie. The two women exchanged tense glances, neither willing to back down. Esther, realizing she had spoken out of turn in her moment of jealousy, tried to explain herself, but found herself cornered by Marie's actions. Now officially an adventurer, Mizunori remembered he had something to ask Marie. He emptied a bag of stones he had collected in the cave onto the table, surprising Marie with their appearance. These were soul stones, the most toxic stones on the planet, used in city construction and magical weapons production. Marie agreed to thoroughly examine them and see if they could be crafted into something useful. She also reminded Mizunori to keep his spatial storage ability secret, as it was a rare and coveted power. Marie warned Mizunori to be cautious, as there were people willing to brainwash or poison him to gain access to his spatial storage power. Understanding the seriousness, Mizunori was extra vigilant. Marie then handed him the substantial reward money for the stones, leaving him overwhelmed by the amount. She noted that his first day as an adventurer had already brought him great fortune, seeing an opportunity to get closer to him. Walking home under the dim streetlights, Mizunori and Esther were now equals in rank. He tried to address the earlier comments about her taking care of him, but Esther, feeling embarrassed, quickly became angry, insisting she had only intended to repay him for his help with the goblins. Her frustration grew at the mention of Marie. In the end, Esther angrily told Mizunori to go home and bathe, concluding his first day as an adventurer with a mix of comfort and happiness, and the significant earnings he had made. Waking up on his first morning without having to go to work, Mizunori couldn't have been more relaxed. Seeing Esther in casual clothes that fit her figure perfectly made it hard for him to look away. However, they soon had to head to the guild to accept a mission. For adventurers, the routine was simple: accept missions and complete them to earn money. Upon their arrival, Marie greeted them warmly and led them to the mission board. Mizunori, after scanning the options, chose a herb-gathering mission for its apparent simplicity. Esther wondered if such a task was too easy for someone who had defeated Graf, a rank C adventurer, despite Mizunori only being assessed as rank F. This was a continuous mission, allowing Mizunori to start immediately without needing council approval. It was also safe, with no penalties for failure. Mizunori's choice surprised Esther, but she laughed and agreed to be his senpai, guiding him through the task. The mission proved to be more challenging than anticipated, even for higher-ranked adventurers, due to the diversity of herbs in the forest and the dangers posed by its wildlife. Before Esther could fully explain, Mizunori triumphantly held up a perfect specimen of a herb. Much to her amazement, He attributed his success to Lid's previous experiences in the forest. As they continued the mission, Mizunori reassured a doubtful Esther, saying her presence made him feel more confident. This made her happy, and they split up to search more efficiently, later regrouping at a designated spot to complete the mission. The difficulty escalated as Mizunori ventured further to find specific herbs, encountering a pack of white wolves. Analyzing the situation, he realized they were the dangerous silver wolves, top predators that included humans in their diet. Unfazed, Mizunori considered scaring them off gently to avoid risking rabies. However, the wolves soon returned in larger numbers. Mizunori repeatedly used his intimidating presence to drive them away until he gathered all the herbs he needed, and the wolves no longer dared to return. Esther, arriving with a small bag, was stunned to see the vast quantity of herbs Mizunori had collected. She wondered if he had cleared out the entire forest's supply. Hearing about his encounters with the white wolves, she was perplexed but impressed. Mizunori's successful completion of the mission, with an enormous bag of herbs and no trouble from the wolves, was a testament to his extraordinary abilities. After thoroughly questioning, she was shocked to realize that these were indeed ferocious silver wolves. However, it was puzzling how he could easily herd them without any injury. Although some people could manage this feat, she didn't expect Mizunori to be among them. Moreover, silver wolves, typically deep forest dwellers, being drawn to Mizunori was truly strange. Deciding not to dwell on it, she resolved to return with him to their group to report to Marie. Just submitting these herbs would earn Mizunori a fortune, enough to last a month. Marie, presumably anticipating this, was speechless at the sight of his herb-filled bag and fainted from shock. Mizunori, in a panic, quickly revived Marie. Upon regaining consciousness and seeing Mizunori's unprecedented haul -103 times what the guild required, Marie was astounded. His reward would be proportionately immense. She used a stone tablet to record his achievements on his guild card. Despite feeling guilty for making Marie press the tablet 103 times, she was delighted. With these accomplishments, Mizunori's rank rose from F to E, leaving Esther astounded by his rapid progress. This was a historical first, a rank advancement in just one day. But Marie was most surprised by his ability to fend off the silver wolves without resorting to magical powers. Normally, adventurers would need to use magic, involving all 9 elements, to repel silver wolves. Fire magic was particularly effective against them. Mizunori was eager to try this magic, but he had to adhere to certain rules and visit magical shops in Phyllis. Realizing his previous attempts at magic failed due to a lack of guidance, Mizunori, accompanied by Esther, headed for Lily's bookshop, a small but well-respected magic bookstore in the city. On entering, overwhelmed by the plethora of magic books, Mizunori couldn't help but exclaim in awe. Despite Esther's caution about being discreet, the shop owner, a seemingly petite girl, overheard his comments but didn't take offense. However, not everyone could access magic. It required innate talent. Meanwhile, a man named Philip had been observing Mizunori from a distance, scheming upon hearing of his feats. He knew someone who could repel silver wolves without magic was extraordinary. Esther led Mizunori into the city, cautioning him about his conduct in the bookshop. Overwhelmed by the magic books, Mizunori's awe was apparent, but his remarks about the shop owner's stature were fortunately not taken to heart. The availability of magic depended on the individual's inherent abilities. She then produced a crystal ball and asked Mizunori to place his hand on it. This ball measured a person's innate magic and categorized it. The brightness of the ball would indicate whether someone had a strong or weak magical core. She warned that she wouldn't sell books to those without magical attributes or accept returns, to avoid being falsely accused of any wrongdoing. Mizunori realized from her resentment that she must have had a troubling past. Typically, people possessed 2 attributes. Having 3 to 4 was rare, and Esther had only 1. Though magic seemed fanciful in Mizunori's world, he was eager to possess it. Without delay, he placed his hand on the ball, which glowed mysteriously. To their astonishment, when he removed his hand, all attributes lit up. This was unheard of. Even the shop owner's master could only wield 7 attributes. She, in disbelief, accused Mizunori of breaking the ball. Pretending to smash it, she instead wanted to confirm something about this extraordinary Mizunori. She took him to a large pillar, asking him to use his light power to burn it. Astonishingly, his attempt punctured the sky, leaving her questioning whether his strength was genuine or a mistake on her part, as she had picked a beginner's paper for him. Such power was implausible for a novice. Next, she suggested he try water magic, which unexpectedly caused a downpour, alarming bystanders in the city. Lily, in a panic, thought Mizunori's abilities were not due to her books, but he knew she was trembling uncontrollably. Realizing she had no reason to refuse, Lily agreed to sell him books. Excited, Mizunori pondered which to choose. He remembered Esther's single attribute, useful in close combat and easy to learn. She suggested a book on enhancing physical strength, fitting for a swordsman like Mizunori, so he decided on it. Lily, irritated by his indecision, picked out a set for him. Basic techniques of water, fire, earth, and wind magic. She was surprised he possessed both light and dark powers, typically opposed. Mastery of these could bring him fame. Mizunori was moved receiving the books. Eager to try them, he knew he had to wait until leaving the city. Lily's actions were driven by curiosity about Mizunori's future, given his rare multitude of attributes, something she hadn't seen in a century. After her help, she reasoned that if Mizunori achieved greatness, it wouldn't be in vain. As they left, Mizunori praised Lily's kind-heartedness. For Esther, this was a first time witnessing such a side of Lily, but more importantly, she admired Mizunori's talents in both swordsmanship and magic. Esther's lavish praise made Mizunori remind her to temper it to keep him grounded. She shrugged off her cluttered thoughts to focus on the present, then turned to Mizunori with a serious proposal. She wanted to team up with him, not trusting anyone else despite having a few friends. She reminded him of her earnest words when they'd first met, which Mizunori had forgotten, saddening Esther. For her, those words were sincere and unchanged. Forming a team was no trivial matter for adventurers. It was directly tied to their safety. Mizunori agreed but was curious why a renowned adventurer like Esther wanted to join forces with him. She was impressed by the power he displayed earlier and believed anyone would want to team up with him. She admired his honesty in returning the coin at the door and helping her against the goblins, where others might have ignored her plight. All these reasons made her want to join Mizunori, feeling stronger and more powerful with him. Before he could fully grasp the situation, she said goodbye and quickly left. Mizunori stood confused, wondering why she rushed off when they were heading the same way. Esther, puzzled by her own hasty departure, pondered if she feared rejection or was just shy. But she realized to be a worthy team member, she needed to be useful, not just rely on Mizunori's strength. Lost in thought, she reached the guild without realizing and decided to check the next day's missions, determined to keep up with Mizunori's pace. Unbeknownst to her, Philip had observed every detail. Mizunori, not overthinking, returned home after a tiring day. The next morning, he found Esther missing. She wasn't in her favorite spot, the kitchen. The maid handed him a letter from Esther, explaining she went on a solo E-rank mission and would meet him at home in the evening. Mizunori wondered if he had upset her, as they hadn't seen each other since yesterday afternoon. Mizunori was puzzled why Esther acted on her own without waiting for his response. Deciding to respect her decision, he dedicated the day to practicing the magic he acquired from Lily. Despite training until past noon, Esther's absence troubled him. He decided to visit the guild for any news of her, feeling a responsibility towards her, just as she had shown concern for him before. Praying for her safety, he headed to the guild. Upon entering, he unexpectedly encountered the two troublemakers from their first meeting, still harboring grudges from their previous encounter with Mizunori. Losing patience with these obstacles, Mizunori was drawn into a confrontation. Remarkably, he subdued them with mere gentle punches, but they tried to distract him by mentioning Esther. Hearing Esther's name and knowing she was on a mission, he sensed something amiss. He pressed them for information, but they were intent on harming him, which he effortlessly prevented. Feeling a foreboding sense about Esther's situation, Mizunori decided to visit the Assassin's Guild to uncover the mastermind behind these events. He couldn't believe Esther's mission and the ruckus caused by these men were mere coincidences, remembering her solo fight against goblins in the forest. At the guild, Marie greeted him enthusiastically, but refused to disclose information about Esther's mission, citing confidentiality rules. Mizunori sensed something unusual, noticing Marie's pale, panicked look, and spotting Philip in the distance. Philip's presence seemed to pressure Marie into silence. Although Mizunori couldn't confirm Philip's involvement, he felt a connection between him and Esther's mission. In a risky move, Marie hinted at Esther's whereabouts and the dangers of an over-leveled E-rank mission. advising him to explore deeper mysteries, her eyes twinkling mischievously with implied meanings. Thanking her, Mizunori quickly left the guild to find Esther, understanding her hints. He pieced together that Esther was deep in the forest, investigating the silver wolves, possibly on a mission beyond her rank. Philip, approaching Marie from behind, inquired about their conversation. Marie deflected, claiming she only shared basic guild rules and techniques with Mizunori. Philip warned her against revealing too much, implying threats if she aided others. He left promptly, allowing Marie to breathe a sigh of relief. Mizunori knew he couldn't waste Marie's risky effort in revealing information about Esther. Determined to repay her kindness, he prayed for Esther's safety and raced to the forest where they had gathered herbs, aware of the silver wolves' formidable strength. Unbeknownst to Mizunori, Esther was in grave danger, hiding behind a rock from giant earthworms, creatures that should have been deep in the forest. Reflecting on her journey since meeting Mizunori, she remembered her encounter with Philip, who had expedited her rank advancement using Mizunori's influence and tasked her with investigating the silver wolves. Her previous battle with the goblins should have alerted her to the strangeness of these events. The earthworms, normally deep forest dwellers, were an alarming sign. Esther analyzed her dire situation, realizing her sword was no match for their armored bodies. Surrounded and without time to think, she was attacked relentlessly. Eventually, exhausted and injured, she fell to the ground, surrounded by the menacing creatures. In her despair, Esther lamented not fulfilling her dream of becoming an A-rank adventurer and returning home proudly. Facing death wasn't new to her, but the disappointment felt overwhelming. Deep down, she had hoped Mizunori would come to her rescue. As she called out his name, fading into unconsciousness, she acknowledged her fortune since meeting him, though fate seemed fleeting. In a twist of fate, Mizunori appeared, lifting her gently. He was visibly pleased to be the one she called in her moment of peril. After placing her safely by a tree, he assured her he'd handle the creatures in a second. He recognized these worms from his earlier cave encounter, puzzled by their increasing numbers, which panicked Esther. Ignoring Esther's pleas to flee, Mizunori comforted her and activated his instant development skill, followed by a wind technique that sliced through the air. His attack decapitated several worms, but not all. Mizunori realized that instant development couldn't unleash the full potential of his magic, signaling a more challenging battle ahead. Mizunori realized he had to rely on his strongest skills. Activating his demonic sword, he effortlessly slashed through the earthworms, undeterred by Esther's broken sword. Esther watched him with a radiant smile, fully charmed by his heroics. After ensuring all threats were eliminated, Mizunori approached Esther, who expressed her gratitude, knowing she owed him her life again. She explained her reasons for going solo, moving Mizunori with her concerns. Esther, embarrassed by her tears, turned away, not wanting Mizunori to see her cry. Mizunori, curious about her earlier invitation to join a team yet choosing to undertake the mission alone, was surprised by her worries. He playfully teased her, unfamiliar with her showing such vulnerability. When he offered her water, they both discovered they had similar space-storing capabilities. They realized they needed to return to the guild, but as they prepared to leave, they felt the ground tremble. Turning around, they were confronted by a sight Mizunori would never forget: a colossal earthworm matriarch, dwarfing the ancient trees around it. Esther shouted that they must flee immediately, knowing the creature's armored hide and rapid movements made it far more dangerous than the previous worms. However, their escape seemed impossible as the matriarch closed in. Mizunori recalled facing this creature before, barely escaping by causing a rockslide at a cave entrance. Now, armed with new magic and skills, he felt an exhilarating challenge instead of fear. The matriarch charged at incredible speed, but Mizunori was faster. Esther watched, speechless at his prowess. Although he could outmaneuver it, its rock-hard armor posed a real challenge. Mizunori cast a spell, channeling Earth's magical energy for an air-slicing strike. The cut bled but quickly healed, a shallow wound on the beast. Esther's initial cheer turned to silence as she realized the difficulty of defeating it. The magic, and even the empowered demonic sword only inflicted minor injuries, which the matriarch immediately healed. Esther, still cheering for Mizunori, was injured and weak from her own battle. Mizunori knew he had to act swiftly to end this formidable challenge. Determined to end the battle swiftly, Mizunori resolved to unleash his most powerful techniques against the gigantic earthworm matriarch. He understood the gravity of this life-or-death battle for both him and Esther. Analyzing the situation, he launched into action, using his demonic sword to create a long gash across the creature's belly. Although Esther knew such a cut might heal quickly, Mizunori had a strategy in mind. He followed up with an earth spell, driving a stone spike into the fresh wound, potentially causing more significant damage. Despite Esther's initial doubts, it became evident that the creature's wounds were healing. Undeterred by their attacks, Mizunori reassured her, lifting the worm into the air with a giant earth spike, and then casting a massive fireball at it. Esther realized Mizunori's plan to immobilize the beast and then incinerate it. Although she worried that a basic fire spell might not suffice, Mizunori's magical prowess was far beyond ordinary, impressing even her. The worm, engulfed in flames, became a giant, roasting mass in the sky, leaving Esther in awe. After a fierce struggle, the worm plummeted to the ground, causing a seismic shock and allowing Mizunori to finally rest victorious. Mizunori had grown exponentially stronger, achieving something he had long aspired to. Esther approached, her skepticism turned to admiration. She realized Mizunori had single-handedly defeated the matriarch without any aid, a feat seemingly impossible for a reborn individual in this world, often scorned and cursed by others. Typically, a group of C-rank adventurers would be needed for such a task, yet he did it alone. Esther then explained her mission, to investigate the silver wolf's appearance in the ancient forest. She deduced that the matriarch was the cause. The earthworm's usual prey, the goblins, had been eradicated by Mizunori, forcing the worms to change their diet. This drove the silver wolves to the forest's edge, leading to their encounter with Mizunori and Esther. Finally understanding the situation, Mizunori realized his immediate need for armor, recognizing the constant dangers and challenges in this world. Esther agreed that relying solely on strength without armor was implausible. Their next task was to collect magical stones from the earthworm matriarch's body. Esther tried to excavate the stones, valuable if sold at the guild, but had to leave the task to Mizunori due to her damaged sword. Mizunori managed to find a large stone, considering using the worm's hard shell for armor. Esther advised that while the shell was hard, it was also brittle, but it could work if Mizunori wanted. After some thought and gathering enough materials, they decided to leave the forest, relieved but exhausted. Suddenly, Esther collapsed, breathless, and Mizunori caught her in time. Concerned about the closing city gates, he carried Esther on his back, ensuring they made it back in time. The gatekeeper was surprised to see Mizunori carrying Esther, but explained that many adventurers were abandoning their E-rank missions due to their difficulty. Esther's popularity and commitment to completing these missions were why she was so respected. Though not officially a team, Mizunori was determined to protect her. Returning home, Mizunori reviewed his skill board for the first time since the cave, surprised to find he had reached level 20. Pondering over the accumulation of skill points, he decided to focus on what was required next. He considered practicing AIK, a martial art that allowed for fluid body movement, effective even against larger opponents. Suddenly, Mizunori experienced a profound change, feeling more in tune with his surroundings and even sensing Esther's presence nearby. He realized the significance of moving from level 4 to level 5, now having another consciousness inside him, speaking to him. He needed time to get accustomed to this and use it proficiently. Remembering the gatekeeper's words, Mizunori began to piece together the situation regarding the distribution of missions. His enhanced cognitive abilities aided in his thinking process. Determined to use his newfound strength to help Esther, he prepared for a long and challenging day ahead, resolving to rest up for the tasks that awaited them. Esther was upset with Mizunori for not waking her upon their return to the city, feeling that her reputation was compromised. However, Mori seemed somewhat pleased by this. Mizunori recalled the gatekeeper's words from the previous day, suspecting something shady about the recurring accidents in these missions. He resolved to uncover the truth about these incidents, knowing he needed to be cautious. Upon entering the guild, Mizunori encountered the two he had defeated earlier, who were threatening Marie to get information about him. They accused Mizunori of injuring them, preventing them from undertaking missions, and demanded compensation. Esther was surprised to learn that Mizunori had fought them, thinking he was in a hurry to find her. She even encouraged Mizunori to give them a lesson, playfully showing him how to punch. Mizunori, not fond of fighting, simply watched as one threatened to report him to the guild for breaking the rules. Just then, Graf, a towering figure, approached. The two complained to him about Mizunori, hoping for retribution. Graf questioned if they were really defeated by a reborn individual, a concept they refused to believe due to Mizunori's strength. The guild members laughed at the dude's claims, finding them too weak. Graf ordered Marie to show Mizunori's registration paper, which confirmed he was indeed a reborn individual. Graf gave the dude an out, suggesting they might have been injured by a monster, and falsely accused Mizunori. Their real motive, seeking compensation from Mizunori, became apparent. They quickly left amid the laughter of the onlookers. Graf joked with Mizunori that he would handle such nuisances for him next time. Mizunori remembered his purpose for visiting the guild, to report the completion of the previous day's mission. However, Marie hesitated and led them to a private room. She expressed relief at their safe return. Esther was irked to see Mizunori thanking Marie, questioning their familiarity. The conversation shifted as Marie was shocked to hear about their encounter with the Earthworm matriarch. She wanted to report it to the guild, but Esther said it was unnecessary since the creature had been defeated, showing Marie the precious stone they had harvested from it. Marie found it hard to believe that Mizunori had fought alone, but Esther insisted it was true. This creature requires a C-rank team to defeat. How could Mizunori, an E-rank, manage to defeat it without a scratch? Mizunori decided to tell her in detail the steps he took to defeat the monster. Now it sounded more realistic and trustworthy. Even though he only used a sword and basic fire magic, he possessed such astonishing strength that Marie was momentarily stunned. She knew Mizunori, but this really gave her the chills. In Urgard, not everyone could use swordsmanship and magic simultaneously. If someone had one, they wouldn't think of learning the other, but would focus on what they already had. Moreover, here, although unspoken, everyone knew that no one could defeat an enemy 10 levels higher. At this point, Mizunori realized that people here were also conscious of their levels. Large monsters were usually level 15, while the queen was level 30. As Esther had said, there was no way a reborn person like Mizunori could defeat a queen monster. Even advancing to level 20 was too low to defeat an earthworm queen. It seemed he was just lucky this time, as Marie always emphasized the impossible. He asked Marie how people here knew their levels. The answer was that they went to the church and were told by others. Esther advised him not to let anyone know his level, as it would create significant obstacles for him. Now Marie would go to assess this stone to decide whether Esther had completed the mission. The appearance of the Earthworm Queen was concerning, but thanks to Mizunori, it was now better. Mizunori shared his doubts with Marie and firmly believed that someone was behind all this. As he finished speaking, the door opened, and a person walked in. It was Philip. He entered with an arrogantly unpleasant demeanor, starting off by mocking Esther, saying he came to see how she would fail in her mission. His face couldn't be more smug, as if he had achieved his grand purpose with Esther. But Marie's declaration of Esther's success left him in doubt. Hearing about the Earthworm Queen made him even more incredulous. It wasn't until Marie presented the precious stone they had obtained that he began to listen more attentively. Mizunori wanted to question him about assigning an overly challenging task to an E-rank like Esther, but his face remained unflinching, replying that he had assigned her the mission due to his high estimation of her abilities. Continue if you can. Rest if you must. No one is forcing you. If you give up now, you're no better than the other cowardly, fear-stricken explorers, he said. Mizunori couldn't hold back and yelled out loud, attracting his attention. Why are you here? He questioned, continually defending Esther, which irritated him. Philip threatened to report to the guild that Mizunori was undertaking missions on behalf of others, which could result in the loss of his explorer status. But Mizunori cleverly replied that he and Esther were a team, and if both team members agreed, there was no need for further explanation to the guild. He then winked at Esther, seeking her confirmation. Seeing him acknowledge they were a team made her very happy, her eyes sparkling as she nodded vigorously. Philip, realizing he couldn't intimidate them with this, began to probe about Mizunori himself, asking everyone else to leave so he could speak privately with Mizunori. He couldn't believe that a reborn person like him could defeat an earthworm, let alone the queen. Mizunori retorted angrily, "There's no such rule," but that was the unwritten law here. Even though he had brought back the precious stone, Philip fundamentally looked down on him, wanting to know how someone who hadn't surpassed level 1 could defeat the Earthworm Queen. Philip was determined to uncover Mizunori's true background that day, unable to believe that a reborn person could destroy the Earthworm, much less the Queen. It was then that Mizunori remembered Esther's words about the limits that couldn't be surpassed. It turns out a reborn person couldn't exceed level 1. Fortunately, he had chosen to break those limits, so now he could rise above. He reaffirmed to Philip that he was a reborn person, leaving him with nothing more to say. But then, Mizunori turned the tables, questioning Philip about his intentions to harm Esther. Though he was sure Philip would deny it outright due to lack of concrete evidence, Mizunori activated his judgment mode, sending chills down Philip's spine, but he denied everything. Mizunori couldn't accuse him based only on his involvement in 2 missions, as it would directly affect Philip's reputation and the trust people placed in him. Mizunori then declared he would lay out each reason that led him to this conclusion. Firstly, there was the sudden increase in the number of goblins on the first day he met her. Philip knew well that goblins were the food of earthworms, luring them with the decomposing scent of their corpses to cause chaos in the forest. Then, taking advantage of this chaos, he assigned Esther the task of investigating the silver wolves. Moreover, his face didn't show any emotion when he read the report about their encounter with the Earthworm Queen. He claimed it was due to his experience in reading reports, but Mizunori didn't believe a word of it. Philip was surprised, but only at the bottom part of the report, the outcome where they had defeated the Earthworm Queen. Realizing he couldn't argue, he silently agreed, implying he would have to take responsibility for these 2 missions Esther had undertaken. Though Mizunori had no concrete evidence to accuse him, he used this as a warning, reminding Philip that neither the guild nor the city of Phillies were his playthings. Philip knew his plans had been foiled by Mizunori and could only silently plot another scheme. He couldn't believe he was exposed by someone he never considered a threat. Mizunori wondered when Philip would stop playing such games. What drove him to harm explorers like Esther? To him, Esther was the first to treat him kindly here, so he wouldn't let anyone bully her. In a fit of shame turning into anger, Philip lashed out at Mizunori, belittling him and Esther as delusional weaklings. Mizunori took this opportunity to confront Philip. He warned Philip for the last time to never harm Esther again. Philip stood before him, growling defiantly, but Mizunori knew he couldn't spare him any longer. Standing up, sword in hand, an indescribable aura emanated from him. Philip felt an energy like that of a lord from Mizunori, but couldn't fathom how a human could possess such power. Deciding to push aside these thoughts to avoid fear, Philip didn't realize he had angered the very person who would be his downfall. Mizunori's eyes, filled with murderous intent, focused on his target. After a dismissive command to leave, Mizunori swiftly struck Philip with his sword. Philip collapsed onto the chair with lifeless eyes, still in a sitting posture. Mizunori, momentarily shocked by his own actions, quickly regained his composure and moved on. A notification appeared that Philip's soul had been cleansed of sins, and Mizunori gained an additional 1000 SP to his strength. His level jumped from 20 to 21 instantly, officially making him a level 2 explorer. He hadn't expected that one action would bring him so many benefits. After receiving the sword strike from Mizunori, Philip seemed to become a completely different person. He nodded gently, promising that he would no longer do evil deeds. Mizunori, after leaving, was still self-reproachful and couldn't understand how he had been controlled to lash out so violently. He resolved to be more careful with his sword in the future. Mizunori also wondered what in his sword had caused such a change in Philip. Seeing him, Esther and Marie ran over joyfully to inquire. The 2 girls, fearing Philip had spoken vile and cowardly words to him, continuously comforted him with sweet words. When asked about the gemstone inspection, he received a surprisingly good result. The stone was highly valued, worth 50 large silver coins, making him think that defeating the Earthworm Queen was more rewarding than hunting goblins. Indeed, the harder the mission, the greater the reward. Marie wordlessly handed him a paper to sign for the mission completion, but he refused. Why wasn't Esther's name on it when they were a team? For Mizunori, being a team meant not caring about such trivialities. Esther was wide-eyed, thinking he said that just to deceive Philip, never expecting him to actually team up with her. But for Mizunori, there was no reason not to team up with an experienced person like Esther. If you say so, then let me formally invite you to join my team, he said. From that day, Mizunori and Esther officially became a team. Marie was delighted for them. The next day, a commotion erupted in the guild. The news posted on the bulletin board was that Philip had confessed to all his wrongdoings, having caused trouble for many adventurers. Many had lost their lives on missions. Others were demoted to rank F, unable to rise again. The guild listened to the complaints of the people and decided to act, restoring the ranks of those previously demoted due to Philip. Though part of the chaos was resolved, The trust in the guild couldn't be easily restored. Philip, the root cause, had fled without a trace, escaping deserved punishment. Henceforth, adventurers were allowed to choose their missions and be responsible for their own lives. However, no one knew why Philip did what he did and who had influenced him. In a narrow alley, Philip met a mysterious woman, her head covered with a black scarf. She was the reason for the dark soul that had possessed Philip, commanding him to act. Hearing him talk about Mizunori, the woman realized her grand plan was under scrutiny. Not only that, Mizunori was now under the patronage of one of the 6 gods, making it difficult to eliminate him. But for her, difficulty was a delight, and she feared nothing. Deciding on this new moon night to be her hunting day, she set out. After Esther and Mizunori became a team, they were like a match made in heaven. Esther's remarkable progress surprised him. Her swordsmanship was truly formidable. He realized she was indeed a talented swordsman. Their training sessions also helped Mizunori learn more about using magic. With the use of enhanced strength at critical moments, Esther's attacks became much stronger. Additionally, she didn't need to think too much about magic power, and could combine it with feinting attacks against the enemy. While they were at the peak of their training session, the innkeeper appeared and scolded them, forcing them to stop. If they kept practicing like that, who would dare to come near her inn to rent a room? Mizunori noticed the attitudes of those around, and knew it was time to stop. During the meal, they both realized they had once again become the center of trouble, all because Esther had insisted on training with Mizunori that morning. Mizunori didn't mind, even complimenting her sword skills. Training with her was beneficial, helping him learn and gain combat experience. Esther couldn't hide her joy. Knowing her decision to form a team with him was right. She wished they could train together every day, but it wasn't convenient here. They needed to find a spacious place for training without disturbing others. Esther suggested renting an empty house where they could live and train freely. Mizunori thought it was a good idea, but was it really okay for them, being of opposite genders? To Esther, if it was him, she could forgive anything. But she dared only to mumble these words, not letting him hear. She quickly got up, preparing to go to the guild. Mizunori thought it over, and, seeing the disastrous food at the inn, knew leaving was the right thing to do. The food was a disaster, and he needed his own kitchen. While waiting for Esther, he decided to check his stats. There were skills he still didn't understand, but he left them for now. Suddenly, he noticed his level had risen to 21, although he couldn't remember completing any mission. It was unbelievable. How could he level up so unexpectedly? He always thought leveling up was only possible through defeating monsters. There was still so much he didn't know. He decided to ask the goddess next time he saw her. But for now, he should enjoy the moment. Leveling up was a joyous occasion, and there was no need for worry. His demon sword required a significant amount of SP to level up. Looking at his points, he had quite a lot, but he shouldn't let that tempt him. His sword was still functioning well. But in an instant, the sword upgraded to level 2, leaving him with only 19 SP. It was a case of greed overruling reason. Curious about the upgraded sword, he observed it. Suddenly, the sword in Mizunori's hand split into 2, and then transformed. Could this be the evolution of the sword at level 2? But strangely, it didn't turn into 2 swords, but into a sword and a bow. Mizunori felt a bit let down seeing this outcome, but couldn't complain to anyone. Now, if it was just a bow, did Mizunori need to find arrows as well? Would that be too cumbersome? He decided to try pulling the bow, but it was incredibly heavy for him. He could only pull it a little before quickly releasing it. Unexpectedly, this caused a large hole in the wall, even though there was no arrow. Upon closer inspection, he faintly saw a black arrow on it. Mizunori slowly began to understand how this weapon worked. Just then, Esther called out to him, so he set this matter aside to meet her. Together, they went to the guild and found Marie there. The guild was now deserted following Philip's confession, as people were still doubtful and unable to trust the guild again. Consequently, the completion rate of missions had also dropped. Marie teased Esther about teaming up with Mizunori, which annoyed her. But then Marie realized the absurdity of being happy for them, thinking perhaps this was Philip's way of apologizing. They learned that their task that morning was to find a place to live, but with their current salary, they couldn't afford the rent. Mizunori decided to take on more missions to level up and was pondering in front of the mission board when he picked up an absurd yet intriguing mission, offering a large gold coin as a reward, almost too good to be true. The mission he chose seemed irrational even to Marie, who arranged everything, but had no memory of this task. Was it a fake mission, since Marie was certain she wasn't behind it? Yet, why was there a divine seal from one of the 6 gods on it? The urgent request was to clean Anice's temple, with 1 gold coin as the reward. Esther, being cautious, asked if he wanted to take another mission, as this one seemed too ambiguous. Marie thought it might be Philip's parting apology to them. Seeing Marie's distress over the unchosen mission, Mizunori couldn't help but feel sorry and decided to accept it for the generous reward and to settle the guild's dues. They couldn't afford to be a loss, even if the mission might be challenging. Marie's eyes sparkled as she saw her handsome savior before her. Esther wondered why Mizunori was so enthusiastic about this mission and not another. For him, all missions were similar, nothing special. He needed armor and wanted to quickly earn a significant profit for the team, making this mission ideal. But the important question now was where the Nasus temple was located. Esther thought it was nearby, in the religious district, where there was a row of temples to search. However, Esther worried whether they could enter, as entering a temple required the deity's consent. If someone didn't have a bond with that deity, they couldn't set foot inside. Mizunori knew that this was a spiritual mystery yet to be unraveled and couldn't be more excited. Esther just hoped they wouldn't waste time unnecessarily on this mission. Without further delay, Mizunori asked Esther to lead the way to the Nasus temple. Mizunori and Esther decided to undertake this peculiar mission together without any complaints. The city of Filiz was divided into 5 major areas, with the noble quarter at the center and the commercial district known for its inns and guilds. Moreover, it housed a vast religious district, so Esther thought starting their search in the commercial district would be the most logical. She excitedly told Mizunori that Urgard had been protected by 6 gods since its inception. After listing the 6 gods, she took this opportunity to educate Mizunori about the local beliefs. She asked if he had any deity in mind to follow, but Mizunori was clueless about these matters, having never believed in spiritual things. Esther worshipped the war god Agni and had even been protected by him. To Mizunori, divine patronage was like being under a spell or enchantment. Esther felt sorry for him, thinking how pitiful his real world must be. Mizunori felt pitied but didn't mind. To Esther, being protected by a deity seemed to enhance one's power. After her baptism, her strength had significantly increased, but the power of the blessing depended on the status obtained during baptism. Mizunori realized that Esther must have received a less than ideal status, which she quickly dismissed and suggested checking their status at the church. Seeing Esther's enthusiasm, Mizunori decided to undergo a status check at the church, despite having his own status board. They arrived at a grand and majestic temple, but Esther quickly hid behind Mizunori. Before he could understand what was happening, he was bombarded with countless sales pitches. Esther, unable to refuse others, would end up emptying her pockets if left alone here. However, Mizunori didn't seem too surprised by the traditional culture here, as this place, apart from being a religious center, was also a hub for genuine traders. It wasn't much different from Mizunori's real world, with a mix of exotic salesmanship. They didn't waste any more time and decided to enter the temple, where they were greeted by an enthusiastic nun. She actively upsold Mizunori, offering a loyalty card for baptism points if done today. It was baffling to think that even churches required loyalty points, apparently to accumulate for shopping and convert into currency. With this card, he could shop across the entire system in Feliz. Mizunori couldn't understand why the church was involved in a loyalty card scheme for trading, finding it rather disgraceful. However, he couldn't blame them since it was the Church of Alpha, the god of commerce, and it was natural for its followers, who were genuine traders, to promote trade. When Mizunori declined to join the congregation, the nun offered him holy water for sale. Mizunori found the price exorbitant, and it was only halved if he joined their church. Frustrated, he inquired about the Nasus temple, but the nun's face soured, and she demanded they join before giving any information about Nasus. Esther, unable to bear it anymore, quickly pulled Mizunori away. Though it was impolite to inquire about another deity at a temple, Mizunori couldn't understand the relentless marketing. Esther explained that such competition was considered healthy here. They still had many places to ask about. After touring around, they found no better results. They were out of breath, realizing they hadn't gained anything from their visits. At the Elmixia temple, people were focused on theatrical performances to enrich their inner lives. And at Agni's temple, it seemed like everyone was hyperactive and constantly fighting. Esther, being a follower of Agni, tried to speak well of the temple, mentioning the distribution of holy swords, but Mizunori recognized them as mere wooden swords used for morning practice. His idealized image of Agni shattered in Esther's eyes, but at least people there suggested they visit the Forces temple for more information. See, Esther slightly cheered up. Mizunori felt relieved. They headed to the Forces temple, which was strikingly magnificent and draped in white, reminding Mizunori of the first goddess he met after his reincarnation. Upon reaching the Temple of Justice, Forces, they encountered a mysterious girl. She angrily questioned why they entered the temple without any information about the worshipped deity. Deciding to demonstrate the power of justice, she began to perform a spell with a handkerchief. Mizunori quickly realized it was just a trick involving a branch attached to her wrist. When the girl saw Mizunori was unimpressed, she switched to bending a spoon. Initially excited, thinking she was joking earlier, Mizunori was disappointed to see her actually bend the spoon, leaving Esther in awe, clapping excitedly. Mizunori shook his head, knowing Esther could easily do the same. When he pointed this out, Esther snapped out of her amazement and realized the truth. Not wanting to play around anymore, the mysterious girl decided to get to the heart of the matter. Mizunori prepared himself, seeing her elaborate and somewhat intimidating setup. However, what followed was the most nonsensical thing he had ever seen. A simple finger-pulling trick that even a child could do was hardly impressive. Exposed and embarrassed, the girl lost interest in performing further. The power of justice seemed limited, and she quickly presented a form, evidently just another ploy to recruit more members into their congregation. Mizunori, unwilling to waste more time, declined and directly asked about the Nasus temple. The girl, clueless about Nasus, left them no choice but to leave. As they departed, she mysteriously lifted her veil, pondering what a great addition Mizunori would have been to their group. Mizunori and Esther felt exhausted from their fruitless journey, having nearly exhausted all options without uncovering anything. Mizunori suggested visiting the Ameno-Hido temple of the natural god, but Esther explained that, as a temple of nature, it had no physical structure. Its followers believed they were encompassed by nature and didn't require a physical temple. They seemed to be losing direction. Deciding not to waste the day, they wandered through the city's nooks and crannies. Mizunori spotted a narrow alley leading to a cargo transfer station. Despite Esther's reluctance, he felt a good intuition about it. Following the alley, they found a peculiar small house made of stone with the Nasus symbol carved on the door. They had likely found the Nasus temple they were searching for. Without hesitation, they began cleaning the temple, which was covered in dust and cobwebs, with a thick layer of dirt on the floor. From the outside, it seemed neglected, as if Nasus had no disciples to continue its legacy. Who, then, had set them on this task? Esther speculated it could have been the gods themselves. Mizunori, surprised and somewhat bewildered, listened as she explained that gods sometimes manifest in rare moments, like Forces appearing at the recent coronation in the kingdom of Yustal. These gods sometimes have close ties with the priests here. Mizunori was curious about when these gods might appear again, as he wished to meet them. Esther mentioned that such appearances were rare and only those chosen could see them. Setting aside this discussion, Mizunori urged Esther to quickly clean up the place. Despite the temple's dilapidated state, he felt a pang of sympathy, contrasting its humble appearance with the grandeur of other temples. Before he could finish his thoughts, Mizunori suddenly found himself transported to an all-white space, facing the goddess he met on his first day. It turned out she was Nasus, the deity in charge of this realm. She even awarded him a first login gift. Nasus praised him for using the body she had given him to survive and thrive since his reincarnation. To Mizunori's surprise, she used a smartphone to Google and find a suitable first login reward for him, a scene quite odd for a deity. Pleased with Mizunori's good deeds, like helping others and diligently training, Nasus decided to grant him a favor, becoming her first disciple. However, Mizunori bluntly refused, not wanting to take on any more burdens, and rejected the reward. Despite his refusal, Nasus seemed determined to make him her disciple, and the title was cursed to be unremovable. Mizunori didn't care for the title, but his rejection angered Nasus, who claimed that it was rare for someone to be blessed as her disciple, 1 in a million. Mizunori wondered why her temple was so neglected if she had followers. Nasus defensively claimed she did have a disciple, although the idea seemed pitiable compared to other deities with countless followers. Mizunori didn't make a big deal of it, understanding her solitude. Nasus continued to explain that the temple was empty because not just anyone could enter. a place meant for the chosen few. Mizunori then remembered what he wanted to complain about upon meeting Nasus again. He had almost died due to her vague explanations, especially about the break-the-limit skill that had confused him for so long. But Nasus argued that if gods explained everything in detail, humans wouldn't strive to overcome challenges, leading to laziness and stagnation. To Mizunori, humans were just a small part of nature, but nearly equal to gods. Nasus found Mizunori quite unique and, showing she trusted him, handed him his demon sword, now at level 2 and well mastered by him. She revealed the sword couldn't harm any being with human essence, and this applied to many in Urgard, including those with mixed origins. The true ability of the sword was to return life. If someone's soul was captured, the sword could help retrieve it. This explained the drastic changes in people like Clement and Philip after Mizunori struck them with the sword. Still curious about who was behind all this, Mizunori now focused on learning how to use his skill board effectively. It seemed that Mizunori had been misusing the skill board, and now Nasus wanted to help him understand it better. She loudly insisted he use the feature to create a status, which wouldn't cost him anything, and would actually enhance his skills and strength attributes. This was probably related to what Esther had mentioned earlier. Now, Nasus decided to teach him her favorite technique. Mizunori's hesitation in choosing a technique frustrated Nasus, who reminded him to make the most of the gifts given by gods and never to waste them. She explained that all skills were diverse, except the few that required the right timing. Being too rigid in using skills based on their names would render them mere potential. Without proper use, even the most powerful skills would be as good as trash. Seeing Mizunori nod in understanding, Nasus was finally able to boast about her successful guidance, noting that being a deity was not an easy task. Although Mizunori had more questions, Nasus quickly left, reminding him to clean the temple and use the broom in the corner as needed. Mizunori then found himself back beside Esther, who was still praying. He casually mentioned the broom in the corner and led her there to get it. Esther was puzzled about how Mizunori knew about the broom, but that didn't matter now as they needed to clean the place before dark. Facing the pile of brooms, Mizunori wondered what to do with the thick layer of dust on them. Remembering Nasus's advice to break his limits, he figured out what he needed to do. Esther took care of the outside, eager to see Mizunori's creative solution. He used a minimal air slash inside the temple to regulate airflow through the windows, blowing all the dust and cobwebs out through the main door. He also felt the sharpness at the end of each slash, a technique he had learned while fighting the earthworms. Esther cheered as he cleaned the house and created a dirt mound outside. However, Mizunori was now covered in dirt from head to toe, looking like an old man. He was as adept at getting dirty as he was during his previous battle with the goblins. Mizunori then used a water technique to clean the area, surprising Esther. However, he lost control, and the water jet hit Esther in the face. Despite being splashed, Esther wasn't upset but wondered how he could produce such a high water jet. Mizunori recalled the principle of a pressure washer from his world and applied it, thinking that if he continued using water spheres, the old structure might collapse. Esther praised his ability to adjust everything so well, even with just a basic understanding. But although most of the water had been cleared, some puddles remained. Mizunori thought to wait for them to evaporate, but they seemed to be flowing towards a direction, leading to a manhole cover that he couldn't open with his bare hands. Deciding to use his demon sword, he opened it, revealing a staircase leading to a secret chamber. It turned out the water had been flowing down here all along. Mizunori had thought there might be a treasure beneath, but was met with disappointment. Esther explained that the space was a shelter for people to take refuge during riots or natural disasters. Considering the temple's desolation, Mizunori doubted anyone used it for shelter. Remembering Nasus's instruction to clean every nook and cranny, he decided to clean the underground area, needing 2 luminous orbs to light the dark space. The area was not as dusty as above, but was overrun with moss. Continuing his cleaning, Mizunori used his water supply skill to wash the area thoroughly. Esther, worried by his prolonged absence, went down to find him standing in a sea of water. Realizing he had forgotten to provide drainage, Mizunori decided to store the dirty water in his spatial storage, despite its filthiness. Esther was amazed at how large his storage must be to accommodate all that water, especially since he upgraded it to level 4. Mizunori then used a vaporization technique to clear the area. Esther began to feel the freshness of the place, and as they were about to leave, Mizunori noticed a hole in the wall. He saw a sewer pipe nearby and quickly sealed it to prevent odors from seeping in, creating a new, beautiful wall with magic. Esther proudly showed him how she had made the outside look new. But they were worried about completing the mission without a divine mark, unsure where to obtain it. Esther then showed Mizunori the mission paper, which surprisingly already had a seal on it. She thanked the deity profusely and bowed in gratitude before leaving. Mizunori found her gracious and charming actions endearing. They completed the mission before dark and decided to head back to the guild. Esther hesitantly suggested visiting a weapons shop, exciting Mizunori. She had always wanted to invite him, but was afraid he wouldn't like it and was scared of the shop owner, who was very particular about his creations. Unfortunately, Esther had broken a sword made by the owner in a previous battle with the earthworms, making her reluctant to return. However, Mizunori, excited, pulled her along to the shop named Simon, located in the heart of the town. As he confidently entered the shop, Esther followed anxiously behind. Inside, Mizunori was in awe at the array of shiny weapons of all sizes. Esther rushed in to warn him about traps, not realizing that he had the skill to predict and avoid them. She ended up caught in a trap, hanging upside down from the ceiling. At that moment, a small, stern-looking man emerged, questioning Mizunori's purpose there. It was only then that Esther spoke up to explain their presence. Simon, the dwarf and owner of the weapon shop, didn't seem pleased. Mizunori introduced himself but felt uneasy, wondering if Simon had noticed his earlier thoughts about Simon's short stature. However, Simon was just annoyed they had come so late, close to closing time. Esther hesitated to explain their purpose, fearful Simon might hit her for breaking his sword. When she finally showed Simon the broken sword, he acknowledged it as his own work without any complaints or anger, leaving Esther surprised. Simon then decided to tell them an old fairy tale about a swordsman who died after his sword broke in battle against a dragon. He emphasized that a sword is a swordsman's soul, and if it breaks, so does the swordsman. Though unsure of the story's truth, Esther took the lesson to heart. Seeing Esther intimidated by Simon, Mizunori stepped in to defend her, explaining that the sword broke during her battle with the earthworms. Simon was surprised, questioning how a rank D like Esther encountered earthworms. He told her to feel lucky to have survived, mostly thanks to Mizunori's help. Simon allowed her to choose a new item as a replacement for the broken sword, a rare instance of him not getting upset over a broken item. Mizunori also expressed interest in selecting some items, and Simon quickly agreed, initially mistaking Mizunori for a disguised creature due to the strange power he emanated. Simon resolved to make Mizunori a loyal customer, having his own plans for him. Mizunori, excited, browsed the shop, finding everything fascinating. Esther suggested he buy a set of armor, anticipating their future needs. Mizunori agreed but was overwhelmed by the choices, unsure what he wanted. He wondered why mages and archers often wore light armor, considering heavier armor would offer better protection. Esther wasn't sure either, theorizing that heavy armor could hinder a warrior's movement or clash with their elemental nature, reducing their power. Mizunori tried on an armor set but couldn't bear its weight, and it made noises with every movement. Esther suggested customizing the armor to suit him better, like modifying her armor's chest area to prevent chafing. Realizing the difficulty in finding the perfect armor, they contemplated their options. Although Mizunori had found enough items for himself, Esther was still undecided about her choices. Mizunori picked up a dagger, unsure if he would use it given he already had his demon sword. Esther shared that she needed a new sword but couldn't afford it given her limited budget. If she bought one of equal quality to her broken sword, she risked breaking it again in future battles. With only 1 gold coin in savings, she was in a dilemma. Mizunori suggested she consider choosing a different type of sword, but for a swordsman, using various swords can be disadvantageous as they might not become proficient with any specific one. He advised her to use her savings, though she worried because it was meant for their shared rent. The good swords were too expensive, costing 4 gold coins, which was beyond Esther's budget. As they pondered, Mizunori spotted a piece of mithril lying on the ground. He asked Simon about it and received a grumpy response. Simon had tried to forge the mithril, but failed. Despite repeated attempts, the mithril remained unchanged, so he had given up. Mizunori proposed to Esther that he would make a sword for her using the mithril, offering to buy it from Simon. Esther was overjoyed at the prospect of having a custom-made sword. Mizunori, already experienced in crafting and at level 4, wanted to buy the mithril, and borrow the forge and tools. Simon, initially irritated, thinking Mizunori was underestimating him, saw this as an opportunity to test Mizunori's true abilities. Esther was disheartened to see Simon being so accommodating and lending his tools to Mizunori. Mizunori placed the mithril in the forge, but it showed no reaction. Esther was baffled by this illogical outcome, while Simon had anticipated it. However, impressed by Mizunori's handling of the forge, Simon thought Mizunori might be able to forge something, just not with mithril. Suddenly, Mizunori performed a gesture over the stone, causing a shocking phenomenon. Simon couldn't believe that Mizunori could ignite the mithril, a feat he had failed to accomplish. For Mizunori, this wasn't difficult as he had read about it in games from his world. Mithril was a magical material. He used fire magic to melt it from the inside, then air cuts to contain the heat. Simon was stunned by the explanation, but Mizunori wasn't sure how to proceed. Esther stepped in, explaining to Mizunori that mithril fundamentally conflicts with magic. If it was truly a magical material, then weapons made from it couldn't defeat monsters using elemental powers, and armor would disintegrate with a single fireball. However, if Mizunori was right, then the mithril had transformed into a soul stone. The mithril Esther had found was a rare gemstone, formed from a soul over thousands of years. Despite its value, Simon allowed Mizunori to continue working with it. Esther was thrilled at the prospect of getting a new companion sword. Mizunori fashioned the sword after Esther's old one, warning her not to be too disappointed if it wasn't perfect. Simon, however, encouraged him, impressed by Mizunori's hammering technique. Although it was getting late and there was still much to do, including polishing and sheathing, Mizunori didn't want to postpone the work. Seeing Esther's excitement, Simon shared his thoughts about his craft, reflecting on his dedication to creating the best, but feeling a recent shift in his perspective as a blacksmith in Phyllis, the renowned best in the city. He felt a sense of emptiness and wondered if age or monotony was the cause. He admitted that he would have strived to forge the mithril in the past, and asked Mizunori to leave the sword with him overnight for finishing touches, promising to showcase his years of accumulated smithing expertise. Marie, hearing about Simon forging a sword for Esther, was incredulous. She couldn't believe a skilled craftsman like Simon would let Mizunori do his work, but the fact that the sword was made of mithril and specially crafted for Esther made it more believable. Marie felt left out of the growing bond between Mizunori and Esther. The next morning, Mizunori and Esther returned to Simon's shop to find him tired and with swollen eyes from a sleepless night. He presented the finished sword, stunning Esther with its pure white beauty. She felt unworthy of such a magnificent weapon. Simon only asked for 10 silver coins, a surprisingly low price. After some haggling, Esther paid the price and left with instructions from Simon to return for repairs if needed. They excitedly decided to test the new sword in the outskirts of the Phyllis forest, but found no goblins around. Mizunori used his X-ray vision to search for goblins, but instead found a slime, which Esther explained was a common pet that cleans waterways. They couldn't keep it due to their lodging rules, and it avoided toxic water, making it useful for finding clean water. Reluctantly, Mizunori released it. He told Esther to stay put while he searched for goblins in the forest, considering burning the underbrush to flush them out, but worried it might attract other monsters. He excused himself to use the restroom, but instead pulled out his skill board to check something. However, he encountered a shocking surprise that he couldn't believe. Mizunori stepped aside to check his control panel. He calculated that to lure goblins, he should use his existing whistling skill, which was used to communicate with dogs, cats, and small birds. This meant it could also attract snakes. To lure goblins, he needed to imitate the sounds of small animals that goblins prey on. He upgraded his whistling skill to level 4 at the cost of 10 points. After finishing, he apologized to Esther for making her wait, and they continued their journey. Esther complimented his whistling, and Mizunori saw this as the perfect opportunity to showcase his goblin calling talent. However, instead of bird sounds, he mimicked goblin noises, causing Esther discomfort. Mizunori reasoned that if he could mimic the sound, why not use it to call goblins directly? But before he could react, Esther felt something was off, and noticed they were surrounded by a large group of goblins, seemingly drawn by the enemy sounds Mizunori made. Esther admitted she was somewhat scared of facing them and wished to proceed slowly. Mizunori comforted her, reminding her that he was there to fight alongside her. He quickly created a three-sided barricade for Esther to focus on just one direction. She was surprised but couldn't lose focus on the enemy. Urged by Mizunori, she confidently wielded her new sword, finding it so sharp and light that it required only a gentle swing to defeat a goblin. Previously, she needed 80% of her strength to defeat one, but now only 40% was required. The new weapon seemed to brighten her future, but as her strength waned and the goblins kept coming, she feared she might lose her will before winning. Mizunori continued to encourage her and kept cheerfully whistling. Each goblin that approached Esther met its end without realizing the fate awaiting them. Finally, the battle ended, leaving a pile of goblin corpses. Mizunori concluded there were no more goblins in the area as his continued whistling brought no more. They decided to collect the goblins' ears for proof and quickly return home. Esther, gasping for breath, thanked the gods for helping her survive this ordeal. She released her frustration with a painful hit on Mizunori, who didn't understand why she hit him. He blurted out a compliment about how clean she looked, but Esther misunderstood, thinking he was commenting on her beauty. It was only when Mizunori clarified that she didn't have much blood on her that she realized her mistake and felt embarrassed. She explained that her attention to the position and angle of her strikes against the goblins helped her stay clean. She suggested Mizunori could learn this skill too. Until now, he thought that fighting more goblins meant getting more blood on him, but it turns out that it could make the sword slippery and obstruct his vision. Mizunori realized he still had much to learn. Esther knew only one person, Luca, who reveled in being covered in blood, a high-level club wielder known as Bloody Luca, who enjoyed splattering blood in combat. However, Mizunori's fighting style differed, so he didn't need to follow Luca's example. Now, they returned to Felice to count the goblin ears. Esther felt guilty about making Marie count them again. On arriving at the guild, their heap of goblin ears shocked Marie. Previously, she had counted many, and now she had to do it again. Despite her reluctance, Marie couldn't refuse Mizunori's sparkling eyes and began her task. Suddenly, a woman with a huge chest appeared, hugging Mizunori and offering him a drink. Esther recognized her as the woman from the Forces Temple. She yelled at the woman to let go of Mizunori, but it had no effect. Esther then noticed a blood-stained club behind the woman. Mizunori, still in the guild, found himself clung to by Luca, who refused to leave him alone. Two men, embarrassed by Mizunori in a previous encounter, were on their way to the guild, preparing for a promotion to rank D, but not entirely honestly. Aware that nothing good happened, since Mizunori's arrival, they remained cautious. Entering the guild and finding Mizunori with Luca, they thought of a plan. Everyone witnessing the scene was envious of Mizunori's conversation with Luca. Esther inquired if the woman was indeed Bloody Luca, to which Luca nodded affirmatively. In Felice, few people could reach rank C on their own, indicating Luca's strength. Mizunori was cautious in his words, wary of Luca. The situation seemed inappropriate, so he invited Luca to sit down for a chat. Mizunori sat down first to demonstrate, but unexpectedly, Luca chose to sit on his lap, creating a scandalous scene before everyone's eyes. Mizunori had to ask Esther to pull Luca away to escape the awkward atmosphere. Esther loudly demanded Luca to get off Mizunori, saying that even as a senior, such ambiguous actions should not be made. Meanwhile, the two schemers seized the moment to slander Mizunori to Luca, fabricating stories of him, stealing achievements from other adventurers, and even killing people, suggesting the blood on him was from his victims. They also claimed Mizunori forced Esther to join his team. Expecting Luca to punish Mizunori, they were surprised when Luca cheerfully shook his hand, expressing joy at meeting him. Their plan foiled, they quickly attempted to leave but were stopped by Graf at the door. Despite their pleas, they couldn't escape punishment and were led away by Graf. After witnessing the foolish due being taken away, Marie, looking exhausted from counting goblin ears, presented Mizunori with a large reward bag for 136 goblins. Mizunori found this to be a more profitable reward than other tasks, but Marie was left crying from exhaustion. Before leaving, Mizunori encouraged her, saying he and Esther would always be there for her. Marie felt revitalized by Mizunori's support and was willing to count goblin ears for him, despite her fatigue. Esther, observing this, noted the power of love's influence. Mizunori and Esther's goblin hunting journey continued relentlessly, improving their skills and levels and accumulating wealth. Mizunori spent a week mastering the skill of not getting blood on him, and quickly leveled up. He also decided to explore archery skills to understand why his bow was so rigid, realizing it was due to his lack of skills in that area. Esther, no longer feeling tired in battles, also leveled up. Though initially discouraged by repetitive goblin hunting, she now felt more motivated. Today, they brought back even more goblin ears for Marie, who seemed overwhelmed by the increasing tasks. The guild board was crowded with unclaimed tasks, including a request to survey the area for a queen rock worm. Mizunori volunteered for the task, believing his knowledge from the goblin's den might be helpful. Esther was concerned as it was a rank D task, and they were only rank E. They needed to level up before taking on such a mission. Mizunori suggested letting Luca know if they couldn't handle it immediately. Luca's appearance and offer to take on the task was a shock to everyone. Despite being drunk the day before, she playfully jumped on Mizunori, injuring Esther, who felt powerless to intervene. Luca, a high-leveled adventurer, wasn't interested in the reward, but in promoting forces. She proposed forming a team with Mizunori and Esther to restore faith in the guild. Her proposal surprised Esther, who didn't understand Luca's drunken affectionate actions towards Mizunori. The trio met at the main gate to start their mission, with Mizunori leading the way. The task was to survey the area for any remnants of a defeated queen rock worm, especially its eggs, and destroy them. Esther, puzzled by Luca's interest in the mission, learned it was because of Mizunori. Luca wanted to recruit him into forces and form a team. Esther protested, wanting Mizunori in Agni, but ultimately conceded, as long as Luca had no ulterior motives. Upon reaching the worm's cave, they were cautious, not knowing what awaited inside. Mizunori, who had forgotten his distant origins, realized the significance of returning to this place under such circumstances. They expected to encounter goblins, but found none, thankfully saving their energy. Splitting up, they cautiously explored. Discovering a sack indicated human presence. Mizunori explained it was used by villagers to transport him here. He informed them about the villagers' fate at the hands of the beast. Luca, while surveying, noticed the cave served as a dumping ground for the villagers, possibly even nurturing the beast unknowingly. Though uncertain, they prepared a detailed report for the guild. The mission gave them a chance to gather valuable stalactites and explore a smaller cave within, where Mizunori had previously battled the beast. They concluded the villagers were unaware of the queen rockworm's existence, as they had already been devoured. Despite the lack of definite conclusions, they planned to report all their findings accurately. Just as they were about to leave, a loud noise emanated from the cave, revealing a horde of terrifying rockworms, their armor harder than stone. Luca instructed Mizunori and Esther to stay back, ready to take on the task herself with the dedication of a true guide. However, Esther spoke up, expressing her desire to confront the worms herself. Having faced defeat at their hands numerous times before, she saw this as an opportunity to conquer her fear once and for all. With Mizunori and Luca standing guard, she felt confident enough to face the challenge. The worms, emerging in unexpectedly large numbers from their small cavernous hideouts, overwhelmed Esther. She called out to Mizunori for help, fearful that she couldn't defeat them alone. Despite Esther's initial desire to battle solo, the overwhelming number of rock worms necessitated intervention. Luca, stepping in to replace her sister in the fight, wielded her mace with fearless determination. Her strikes were strong enough to penetrate the worms' armored bodies, rendering them motionless in defeat. As she fought, the blood of the worms splattered everywhere, defining her as the blood-soaked Luca. Esther and Mizunori watched in awe as Luca took down the rock worms with her formidable combat style. With Luca's encouragement and Mizunori's support, Esther found the courage to rejoin the battle. Empowered by her new level and a superior sword, the rock worms no longer posed a significant threat to her. As Esther successfully vanquished a worm without any armor, Luca expressed her pride in Esther's regained confidence. However, their task was far from over. Scattered among the rocks were numerous worm eggs, indistinguishable from the stones themselves. Faced with the daunting task of locating and destroying these eggs, potentially stretching into the night, Mizunori proposed a solution. He suggested filling the area with lava, not only to destroy the eggs, but to seal the cave. Luca was hesitant, sensing potential danger in Mizunori's plan. Still, Mizunori saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate his abilities and contribute significantly to the mission. After Mizunori completed his task, the group finally got a chance to rest. Surprisingly, Luca decided to strip down and bathe in the water, using the excuse that she needed to wash off the blood from the rockworms. The cold water forced her to huddle close to Mizunori for warmth, making him uncomfortably avoid looking at her. Mizunori, trying to maintain decorum, suggested using magic to clean her, urging her to get dressed and not behave inappropriately. Luca teasingly questioned whether Mizunori was too innocent or inexperienced with women, adding that his decency made him more attractive to her. She then curiously inquired about Mizunori being thrown into a sack and discarded, to which he explained his ostracization in the village due to his unusual hair and eye color, and being perceived as an unlucky omen. Luca, touched by Mizunori's past experiences, comforted him, assuring him that those days were behind him. However, Mizunori suddenly remembered something important and clarified that he had lost his memory and had no recollection of his life before Felice. Luca found it hard to believe, but her gaze at Mizunori indicated a special interest. She then planned to explore the village to inquire more about the rock worm and understand the local culture better, a plan Mizunori wholeheartedly supported. Curious, Mizunori asked Luca why she chose to become an adventurer. Luca shared that she grew up as an orphan in a Forces orphanage, with adventuring being a side job. She expressed gratitude for being a follower of Forces from a young age, and how the teachings of peace and mutual aid influenced her life. She recalled questioning the teachings as a child, wondering if following them meant sacrificing something else. This introspection helped shape her approach to life, prioritizing helping others. A few days after the incident, Luca shared that she was rescued by a group of adventurers. This inspired her to become an adventurer herself, instead of just reading books and praying. She decided to help others, driving Mizunori to feel somewhat embarrassed about his own reasonless journey into adventuring. He realized he had misunderstood Luca's personality and character, but Luca quickly reassured him, stating that the reasons for our actions are less important than the results we achieve. Besides, weren't they both quite similar, having come to this world alone? The two smiled at Esther, who was sound asleep in the distance. Luca mentioned that being an adventurer wasn't her primary job, so she wasn't interested in joining a team. She thought that Mizunori and Esther, even without her, were a good pair. She found their adventure today to be quite exciting and was sure that Esther would be thrilled to form a team with Mizunori. She encouraged them to rank up quickly to catch up with her. When Esther woke up, she was relieved to learn that Luca had already left to inquire about the village. She had slept soundly, almost as if the cave was her home, and couldn't deny Mizunori's role in making it safe. Luca returned with news that no villagers knew about the rock worm, and the villagers' ostracization of Mizunori due to his black hair and eyes, signifying evil, was understandable. With their mission accomplished, they decided to return to the guild to report. Marie praised the trio for completing their task. Luca also decided to take the test to rank up to B, having made up her mind. This was perhaps the best news for Marie that day. After accepting the rank-up test, Luca had to leave. Esther, feeling a bit jealous, interrogated Mizunori about what he did with Luca while she was asleep. Mizunori honestly replied that they just chatted about their adventure. Marie handed Mizunori a new mission: to conquer the Flare-Light dungeon and bring back a bag full of Flare-Light, a rare flammable liquid found in the dungeon. The dungeon mainly housed E-rank monsters, but a D-rank boss awaited at the end. They had a week to complete the mission, and failure meant being barred from other quests for a period. Marie hesitated to reveal the dungeon's location, indicating it was a guarded secret. Mizunori decided to find out himself, and Esther was surprised to learn this was her first dungeon experience. Dungeons, often filled with treasures, attract many adventurers, turning them into a rare commodity. The two realized they needed to gather information quickly to locate the Flare-Light dungeon. Unbeknownst to them, the two men from before were eavesdropping, unwilling to let Mizunori rank up before them. Mizunori thought that to find the dungeon's location, he needed to seek out D-rank adventurers who had gone before. This would likely require something in exchange, a potentially costly endeavor. Surprisingly, Esther revealed that she knew the dungeon's location, having gleaned the information from her predecessors through her charming and attractive appearance. Mizunori reflected on his previous life in another world, realizing he had never met anyone as kind and well-liked as Esther. He felt truly fortunate to have her in his team. Following Esther's guidance and knowledge, they headed to a store called Morning Star Groceries. There, they received a leather bag to collect the flammable Flare-Light during their mission. The pregnant and friendly store owner, Janet, inquired about their Flare-Light dungeon venture, exciting Esther. Janet warned them to be cautious of the time in the dungeon as her husband had gone there and hadn't returned. She playfully teased Esther about looking like a perfect couple with Mizunori, and even joked if they were undertaking the mission for baby funds. Mizunori, feeling embarrassed, quickly bid Janet farewell and hurried off with Esther, unaware they were being followed. 2 hours southeast of Phyllis lay the Flarelight Dungeon, its entrance marked by a mysterious staircase neither natural nor man-made. The dungeon, known for its labyrinthine nature, attracted many adventurers. Agreeing not to use fire magic due to Flarelight's flammability, Mizunori led the way with Esther following. He used his scouting skills to survey the area and discovered a matrix of traps. Esther had heard tales of many adventurers struggling to reach the final round. Realizing they were in a potentially deadly situation, she noted that someone skilled in tracking could deactivate these traps. Before Esther could finish her thought, a loud noise signaled Mizunori had used his air-cutting skill to disarm the area. Now they could move freely without caution. Impressed by Mizunori's talent, Esther enthusiastically joined him in venturing deeper into the dungeon. After effortlessly navigating the trap matrix, Mizunori and Esther delved deeper into the dungeon without much caution. However, as they went further, they prepared for the inevitable appearance of monsters. Mid-sentence, Esther heard a distant noise, indicating the monster's arrival. A pack of large silver wolves charged towards them. Having encountered them before, the duo knew they were formidable in numbers. Mizunori used his suppression skill to scare the wolves away, sparing them due to a fond memory of his pet Shuro. Finally, they reached the dungeon's deepest chamber, only to be greeted by 2 giant goblins wielding swords at the entrance. These goblin chiefs seemed like a legend come to life. Esther, intimidated by their size, knew they had to fight these formidable D-ranked monsters. Mizunori's initial enthusiasm waned as the goblins charged without warning. Esther shouted to divide and conquer, but struggled with her foe. She then noticed Mizunori had already incapacitated his goblin. He nonchalantly explained that he found these goblins unlovable, unlike the earlier wolves, which he had merely intimidated. Esther, though struggling, refused Mizunori's offer to help, determined to prove her progress. Her improvement made Mizunori praise her, which she bashfully enjoyed. She realized that her lack of confidence had been her greatest weakness. With the goblin chiefs defeated, their next task was to collect Flarelight. They found a boiling pool of a substance smelling like gasoline, which turned out to be Flarelight. Carefully, they filled a leather bag with it and left the dungeon, with Esther feeling increasingly competent and closer to reaching Mizunori's level. Mizunori blushed with embarrassment at the compliment, unsure of how to respond, but the successful completion of a D-rank mission in the dungeon was a noteworthy achievement for both. Mizunori immediately thought of Marie's likely joy at their success. Meanwhile, Esther debated whether to return to the guild hall first or stop by the Selmine General Store, considering Janet's kindness and concern about her husband's whereabouts. While deliberating, Mizunori detected an unusual smell, which Esther also noticed. They saw Phyllis engulfed in smoke and hurried towards the city to investigate. Upon reaching the outskirts, they saw people evacuating and many injured. They were about to head to the city gate when a gatekeeper handed them an injured person and asked Mizunori to take them to safety. They learned Phyllis was under attack by a large creature and was ablaze. Esther and Mizunori wondered what could cause such chaos in Phyllis. A few hours earlier at Selmai, Janet was visited by relatives who came to help her, as she was close to giving birth. While they were chatting, a noise startled them. A kind man volunteered to check it out, but did not return. When another relative went to look, he found the volunteer dead with a blood-eyed wolf standing over him. At that moment, Luca was reading magic books at her justice store when she noticed an alarming surge of murderous intent in Phyllis on her map. She heard chaotic noises outside and saw the horrific scene of humans being slaughtered by silver wolves. In disbelief that Phyllis could fall to such a state, Luca considered using a powerful spell, but realized it was too late and risky. Despite the danger, Luca, with her commitment to justice and peace, couldn't accept this chaos. She saw the silver wolves advancing towards her, and without fear, grabbed her legendary mace and raised it high, calling for other adventurers to join her in repelling the wolves. Upon hearing Luca's call for aid, no adventurer, especially a C rank like her, could refuse. She rallied them to arm themselves and aid the townspeople. Yet among those bravely stepping forward, there were also frightened rookies, doubting their ability to defeat the formidable silver wolves, given their low strength and level. Luca then decided to remind them of an adventurer's duty, to enforce justice and protect the people and peace in times like these. Raising her mace high, she recited Forsa's oath of justice. Her encouragement infused other adventurers with renewed strength. Even F-rank adventurers felt empowered to easily take down the Silver Wolves, fighting valiantly alongside their comrades, refusing to retreat. Their collective fight for justice spread throughout Phyllis, turning the tide of the battle. Luca reminded everyone to use the surrounding space wisely to avoid being cornered. With her leading, success seemed certain. Yet she wondered about the origin of the Silver Wolf Pack, an unprecedented phenomenon in Phyllis. While assessing the situation, she noticed a strange amber liquid oozing from the wolves and realized it was flare flight. The wolves had been prepared with flare flight in their bodies, suggesting a premeditated plan. As fire spread throughout the city, ignited by the volatile liquid, chaos ensued. Luca, watching her shop and magical books burn, was speechless, determined to uncover the truth behind this orchestrated disaster. Meanwhile, Esther and Mizunori, informed by the gatekeeper about the sudden appearance of the wolves within Phyllis, rushed to help. The gatekeeper, seeing them enter the city, shouted a warning to be careful. Mizunori quickly realized the wolves hadn't come from outside the city as the outskirts remained peaceful. Without further delay, he and Esther ventured into the city to save Phyllis, with the gatekeeper calling after them to stay safe. Rushing through the sea of flames, they beheld the devastation around them, deeply pained by the loss of so many lives. Amid the chaos, Mizunori spotted a wolf attacking a woman. It was Janet, desperately trying to protect her unborn child. Tragically, they were too late. Both Janet and her child were gone. Esther, filled with rage and regret for not arriving sooner, resolved to avenge Janet and others who perished. Mizunori gave Esther an air shield to help her breathe, but she noticed something unusual about him. He advised her they must split up but urged caution. As adventurers, their duty was to fight with all their might to save Phyllis. Each wolf they encountered had to be eliminated without mercy. Esther's resolve was unwavering, ready to confront any beast that crossed her path. She observed Mizunori's eyes glowing with an unusual purple light, not just the reflection of the flames in dusk. While Esther focused on rescuing people, Mizunori knew he had to extinguish the rampant fire. Surveying the scene, he realized the immensity of the task at hand. The fire's ferocity and a mysterious negative energy permeated the city. Determined to find a solution, Mizunori rapidly conjured a plan. Back at the guild, Marie was shouting orders, coordinating a rapid evacuation. F-rank adventurers were tasked with protecting the guild headquarters and fighting the fire, while E-ranks formed groups to combat the beasts. Water sources were distant and perilous, so they relied solely on magic to quell the flames. Marie was on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion, having worked non-stop for 30 days and nights in the absence of a guild leader. She was the linchpin holding everything together, ensuring smooth operations amidst the crisis. With both adventurers and soldiers striving to protect the city, Marie felt the weight of responsibility, leaving her no room for rest. Suddenly, Marie remembered Mizunori and wondered if he was en route to the dungeon. Surprised at her own reliance on someone else, determined, she geared up to control the situation herself, realizing the urgency of the moment. Unexpectedly, Graf passed by, suggesting she could switch to being an adventurer. He assured her he'd handle the guild's protection, relieving her of some burden. Outside the guild, a beautiful girl was being harassed by a beast, looking utterly hopeless. Fortunately, Graf intervened, effortlessly dispatching the creature with a few kicks, earning the girl's lifelong gratitude. His presence was a boon to the guild, his confidence unwavering as he fearlessly entered the fray. Meanwhile, Marie and the others tirelessly fought the fires and creatures, overwhelmed by the scale of the attack on Phyllis. A sinister plot seemed to be unfolding, the wolves' appearance too orchestrated to be a coincidence. Amid the chaos, Luca discovered a strange amber liquid oozing from the wolves. Flare-light. The beasts were deliberately filled with the flammable substance, turning them into living firebombs. As the city burned, Luca and Marie coordinated the defense. Luca rallied the adventurers with a speech, inspiring even the low-ranking ones to fight courageously. She realized the complexity of the situation. The coordinated attack on Phyllis was part of a larger, more malevolent scheme. Back with Mizunori and Esther, they were horrified to find Janet, a beloved figure, fatally wounded by the wolves. Fueled by grief and anger, they fought fiercely, determined to save the city. Mizunori, realizing the need to extinguish the fire, devised a plan. His actions displayed his increasing mastery of magic and strategy, hinting at his true potential. As the situation worsened, Graf encountered a young girl, encouraging her to stand up and fight. He reminded her that overcoming this crisis would be an invaluable experience. The girl, in awe of Graf, wanted his autograph, but he urged her to focus on the battle at hand. The townspeople, adventurers, and soldiers united in their efforts to fight the beasts and quell the fires. Amidst this chaos, Graf longed to uncover the mastermind behind the attack, sensing a larger conspiracy at play. Suddenly, he noticed droplets of water falling from the sky, signaling the beginning of the end of the fires. However, he realized it wasn't rain, deepening the mystery of the situation. In the midst of the chaos, Luca tried to calm everyone, directing them to use water from a nearby well to extinguish the fire. However, she soon discovered the water was poisoned, evidenced by a dying slime emerging from the well. Before she could warn everyone, she collapsed from the poison. This sinister development revealed the enemy's elaborate scheme to trap everyone with no escape. As a wolf approached the paralyzed Luca, a sudden downpour doused the flames and restored movement to those immobilized. Luca and Graf realized the rain was inexplicable and couldn't have naturally quenched such a massive fire. Attention turned to a young man on a rooftop, summoning rain and wind. Mizunori, the adventurer who miraculously saved Philes. His use of costly holy water, which would require a fortune to acquire, stunned everyone, including Luca. Luca, regaining her strength, used her magic to further dry the area, ensuring the toxic fumes didn't linger. Unbeknownst to her, the holy water came from Mizunori's stock, previously collected from a church and stored in his spatial storage. His foresight in preserving the water proved life-saving, showcasing his extraordinary abilities and resourcefulness. Mizunori, in a crucial moment, ingeniously managed the water flow by adjusting the opening of the spatial storage bag. He used air slicing techniques to disperse the water further, ensuring the entire city of Philis benefited from his quick thinking. Lily approached him, concerned about the source of the seemingly holy water. Mizunori, slightly worried about being discovered using impure water, was surprised to learn she thought it was holy water. In reality, the water was just regular water he had stored in his space storage, unknowingly becoming vital in this crisis. He wondered if its time in the church had somehow sanctified it, recalling how he had cleaned the church on a previous occasion. As they prepared to face a new onslaught of monsters, Lily asked to borrow Mizunori's power for the battle. They fought in perfect harmony, with Lily masterfully casting her spells. Her powerful light magic illuminated and overwhelmed the shadow-corrupted beasts, restoring peace to the area. Meanwhile, Esther, witnessing the battle from below, recognized Lily's immense power and the transformation of the monsters, realizing her potential as a supreme magician. Mizunori was equally impressed and eager to learn from her. After the magical display, Lily, exhausted, collapsed, apologizing for her weakness. Mizunori, however, saw her strength and was inspired to continue his own journey as an adventurer. He remained vigilant, sensing something was still amiss. Luca, feeling something was off about the situation, decided to head to the Forces Church for answers. Mizunori, left with Lily, sensed a strange scent in the air, not of monsters or wolves. As he turned, he saw Luca approaching, seeking to assist. Mizunori reassured her that he was committed to fighting for Philes as part of his duty as an adventurer. After Luca left for the church, Mizunori turned back to Lily, asking for a detailed account of events to understand the situation better. He sensed that something about the scenario was not quite right. Esther, upon reaching the scene and finding Mizunori with Lily, was understandably surprised. Mizunori proudly shared that it was Lily's powerful magic that had vanquished the Silver Wolves. Esther, who had witnessed the battle from below, was curious about the high-level magic that had defeated the monsters. She comforted Lily, who sought solace in her embrace. Esther, suspicious of Mizunori's intentions during Lily's vulnerable state, was relieved to hear his clear and immediate denial of any wrongdoing. Esther had thoroughly examined Philis's walls but found no anomalies, ruling out the possibility of the Silver Wolves breaching or climbing over to enter. The presence of flarelite in their stomachs and the poisoned well water only deepened the mystery, suggesting a calculated and sinister plot behind the attack. Saddened by Janet's fate but determined, Esther agreed to take care of Lily, while Mizunori went to investigate the peculiar scent he noticed during the wolves' appearance. Mizunori left, thanking Esther for using protective magic on him during the battle. which had kept him unscathed. Meanwhile, in the church's underground shelter, two nefarious individuals, Remick and his companion, were discovered to be the ones who had facilitated the wolves' entry by breaking a wall under the church's shelter on someone's command. A mysterious woman, finding them there, began to undress, preparing for a bloody task, leaving Remick filled with regret for his actions. Mizunori, entering the church, sensed many people had taken refuge there. He realized that the god Nisus had foreseen the events and had prompted him to clean the church as a shelter for the people. Despite this divine foresight, human fate remained unpredictable. Downstairs, Mizunori found a large group of Nisus's followers who chose to stay back to clean the sanctuary. Mizunori respected their devotion and left them to their tasks. As he exited, he made a silent prayer to the deity and used his sword to create a portal to a nearby dungeon he had discovered earlier. He ventured into this new path, contemplating his next move and seeking guidance from the divine. Mizunori, while exploring the dungeon, noticed the numerous footprints of silver wolves, suggesting their passage through this very tunnel. Suddenly, he heard footsteps and was surprised to encounter Luca, who he thought had gone to the Forces Church. Luca, in a distressed state, embraced Mizunori and revealed a harrowing discovery. Upon her arrival at the church, she found that all the evacuees had been killed by the silver wolves. She had investigated a large hole in the church's basement, suspecting it as the wolves' entry point. Mizunori, puzzled, inquired why Luca smelled like the silver wolves, a scent he could detect due to his heightened senses. Luca hastily detached herself and denied any connection, attributing the scent to the pervasive presence of wolves on the ground and the scent of sewage, detectable only by those with keen olfactory abilities like Mizunori. Luca's explanation, however, seemed off to Mizunori, especially her decision to carry a dagger instead of her iconic blood-soaked mace. The dagger she carried reeked of human scent, which raised further suspicion about her true identity. Suddenly, Luca's eyes darkened, and she revealed a sinister smile, indicating that she was not the real Luca but an imposter. The unfolding events hinted at a deeper conspiracy, with the impersonator possibly playing a pivotal role in the chaotic events that had befallen Phyllis.